So where do we start with this one? It was a fight that made headlines and captured the casuals. It was a fight that promised us guts, glory, and it was sold to us via the legacy of two British boxing icons, Chris Eubank Sr and Nigel Benn. From the fallout last time, the comments from Eubank Sr in the build-up and the infamous egg slap, let's be honest, the theatrics that built the promotion went down like a fine wine to fight fans. Of course, most of us love a bit of argy-bargy or a push and a pull, as the Cobra would say, but above all, it needed to deliver and left us all with questions. Would it be another hype job that would stink the place out for 12 rounds, or could this actually be a fight that delivered on all its promises? The latter is exactly what it was. So in order for this fight to even happen in the first place, the goalpost would have to be moved. With Eubank Jr campaigning at middle and super middle and Benn 2 divisions below him at welterweight, the fight between the two wasn't exactly a natural progression for either man. Simply put, if both fighters didn't have the surnames, this fight would never have happened in the first place, plain and simple. So Eubank Jr weighed in on the scales in the morning before the fight at exactly 160 pounds, 0.05. Unfortunately for him though, this was 0.05 over his contracted limit and the first time that he'd ever missed one. And Conor in the meantime came in fresh off a big breakfast and tipped the scales at an easy 156.4. At this time, it was clear to see who had all the momentum. This was even clarified later on that day when Eubank posted to social media some behind the scenes footage of his weight cut before the weigh-in just to show the difficulty of what he had to reach. However, the troubles would not stop there, because after all the tomfoolery around the weight cuts, he wasn't even allowed to have a full belly after the weigh-in because of a £10 rehydration clause. And knowing Eubank as we do, he definitely wasn't up for letting go of another 500 grand. But like a true professional on fight day, at around 8 AM as he weighed in yet again, he was squeaky clean on the scales and came in around 169.4 to meet all other contractual obligations, and the world finally had the fight they've been longing to see. So earlier that night we had seen some silky skills and some good displays from Vidal Riley and Aaron McKenna. Anthony Yard and Lyndon Arthur didn't exactly light up the show before the main event, but there was a special someone that did get the crowd going before Eubank and Benn made their ring walks.
Have a look at this! He's here! And the crowd are going wild!
So yes, it was a crazy turnaround from what he had said days before, and it was a script that even Vince McMahon couldn't have written. Was he playing us all along, or was it a last minute decision? The sad truth is, we'll probably never know. Anyway, after the undercard came to a close, it was time for the main event, and time to settle a score spanning more than 30 long years. Now the first bell rang and Conor sprinted out the blocks like a caged animal. He looked razor sharp, looking to end the fight early and fulfill his prediction of a 2-round demolition job. However, although having some close calls, Eubank was able to weather the storms. Rounds 2 and 3 pretty much played out the same, with Conor ducking and weaving his way into range, throwing some serious beef behind his punches. It was said by some before the fight that because of the weight differences, the bigger man in Eubank would be able to absorb Benn's punches fairly easily, but others said his chin had gone since the Liam Smith fight and that he would get clipped early. However, in the first 3 rounds, some of the absolute scorchers landed on the chin of Junior, and although he took them well, you could tell he maybe would have had some serious problems should he keep on taking shots like that.
It's fought at a much higher level, Eubank Jr, as he ships a right hand again. And Conor with a left hook in the first minute of the 3rd round, and Eubank felt that, and there we go. Now Benn will believe he has the power to shake his nemesis.
And as they came out for the 4th, it might have been a worrying time for a few of the Eubank faithfuls, but to his credit, he started to bite down on his gum shield and began to stand in the pocket, gradually turning the fight in his favour. So at the midway point, neither fighter was really winning convincingly over the other, but you could just tell Eubank was beginning to turn the tide, and it was here where we saw a good fight turn into a great one. The gears went up another level, and whilst Conor still had his foot firmly on the gas pedal, Eubank began to press forward and make his size known. A flurry of lefts, rights, uppercuts, body shots. Eubank rained them down on Benn as he replied in the same manner, but just didn't have the same effect as earlier. And from here on, both men stood toe to toe, having a proper old-fashioned tear-up, the likes of which we don't see enough these days. And the championship rounds belonged to Eubank Jr as Conor began to fade down the stretch. But it's worth saying that at no point during the fight did either man take a backward step or look like they were about to throw the towel in. It was simply a warrior's performance from both, and as the final bell rang, it marked a piece of history for those watching on TV, along with the 67,000 who were there in the arena. So prior to the fight, not many thought that these two could actually pull it off the way they did. The fight was on par, if not better, than what their fathers had produced 35 years ago, so fair play to both for putting it all on the line and giving us one to remember. Then it was on to the scorecards, and they read 116 to 112, all in favour of Eubank. And although it was a very competitive fight until the end, if anyone was going to nick it, it was definitely the formidable Junior. So Conor looked vacant as he leant over the ropes and came to terms with what had just happened. It looked like the loss had taken just as much out of him as the fight had done, and his all-protected zero had just been taken by a family rival. But then again, it wasn't all doom and gloom for the Destroyer. It may be a cliche, but his stock rose in that defeat. It was an absolute war, and to have a war like that, it takes two to tango. Conor pressed the fight from the start, and the cojones he showed in the ring that night won't be forgotten too soon. After he had healed up just under a week later, he headed to New York for the Times Square card, where he was mobbed by media and fans, both praising him for his performance and questioning him on his next move in the squared circle. It's no secret that he didn't make the trip over the pond as a tourist. He was there eyeing up two fighters in particular, Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney. He certainly had his back and forth with the two previously, but now his name is firmly on the map, and it wouldn't be a surprise to see him in the ring there with either fighter in the future, even though both of them looked a bit out of sorts on the night. Having said that though, let's be honest, the rematch with Eubank will surely be the one that he is gunning for. Desperate for revenge, and knowing that the fight was close last time out, he knows he can turn it around in his favour next time out. Although, is it a good move for Conor to trigger the rematch immediately, or should he chase other ventures in the meantime? He really does have a major decision to make, and he needs to make it very soon. And then as for Eubank Jr, if he was 5 years younger, you would say that he now has the world at his feet, but the undefeated father time is certainly creeping around the corner. This fight was so brutal, you just can't have many of them in a boxing career, so who knows what that took out of him. Although, one thing is for sure, he won't be stopping anytime soon with the financials he can now command. But the big question, of course, is surrounding weight. Can he make 160 again for a start? Well, I suppose yes, but definitely not with any ease. However, if we're throwing options on the table, it may be difficult for him to go any other route from the Benn fight, because he knows it's the biggest payday outside of Canelo by a mile. And Canelo's all tied up now, so that ain't happening anytime soon. So in the end, who would have thought that Chris Eubank Jr and Conor Benn would put on one of the best fights of the last decade, and probably the best fight that will happen this year? Maybe we just should have known this from the surnames and the genetics that they possess. Both men proved that it wasn't just about a pound note to them, it was about glory and about history. But most importantly, it was about two sons wanting to make their fathers proud.